This conference will now be recorded.
I guess we're muted, I'm sorry. I forgot to unmute the meeting. Georgia, we're having technical difficulties with the document. In case you can't tell, it's upside down. I'm trying to fix it. I'm going to open it up in the program, and then I should be able to flip it.
This is for November because we do not get our financials that fast that I can give you the one for December, I guess, but you'll see on there that there's not much to report on the GSEDD finances. We don't really pay a lot of attention to them anyway unless they have to get close to the budget item. The HOA is where we have an issue right now because we did have a changeover from Castle to PW. We haven't quite come up with the finances yet in order to show what we spent and what our percentages are left. And I put a note in there, HOA financials for November was unavailable because of the PPCA management changeover from Castle to PW, working with Jennifer Lewis to get the November info if possible. If not, we can hopefully catch up on the December report. Now, I guess we can hear from Jennifer. Well, if that's okay. Yeah, if you would, go ahead and talk about that, and I have something else after that.
So the KW.
Jennifer, state your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Jennifer Lewis with KW Property Management. The accounting department just received some financials from Castle, so they're working through a lot of that. We've had some delayed invoices coming in from vendors, and Chris Santos has been forwarding those to me as they come in. So we have probably some post charges that will have to be adjusted as well. But once we get through all of that, I'll be working with Elise at the corporate office to get that financial report. We did get the financials in, and we did get a list of what the reimbursement was, but we didn't get any of the line items in from Castle. So we have 90 days to get all of this information from Castle. So we'll make sure we get those.
Okay. I did meet with Jennifer yesterday, I guess, and one of the problems, the way I see it, is that still not exactly sure the CDD, which invoices they pay for or which invoices you pay for.
That's correct. We're working our way through it, and we do have the board approval level as well. So thankfully they know some of the invoices that come in, and we're able to figure those out. But it is a little bit of a learning curve right now, but we will get there.
And the other thing is whether or not I need to approve them or somebody else is going to approve them. So we need to get that worked out.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And let me know what's decided as far as if you're approving. I'm not sure here at the community level how that works.
Are we expecting the December financials to be straightened out?
Oh, absolutely. Actually, we've been uploading and paying a number of what we received from Castle. We didn't get a breakdown of the GLs separated out. All we got was the reimbursement amount. So we could work through that and get that report done.
Thank you. On the bottom of the report, you'll notice the balance sheet data. And I put a note at the bottom of it says discussion because one of the things I'm quite concerned about is the low balance of the unassigned reserves. And as I recall, unassigned reserves is mainly paying for expenses that we don't really know about ahead of time, and so we've had that money in order to come up and pay for these expenses. When I first started, which hasn't been that long ago, maybe 6 months or so ago, we were over $1 million. And now we're down to $31,115. That concerns me and should concern the whole committee, I would think. I don't know exactly what we do, and maybe this is a question for Laura. What happened to our savings for last year? I think there was 300 and some thousand savings for last year, and I thought that was supposed to be put into, or under budget money. I thought that was supposed to be put into unassigned reserves.
Camera and sound issues. They don't make the official transfer into the reserves until the financials have been audited, which we just started.
Okay, so what are we talking about? Another month, 2 months, 3 months?
It normally takes 3 or 4 months. They're finalized by July, but they're normally done being audited by like April, so it's gonna be a few months. Stephen Bloom is actually on the line, and whether or not he can hear us, I don't know, but he would be very well equipped to be able to answer your questions regarding the specific funds.
Well, so in other words, for the next 2 or 3 months, or however long it takes, we're going to have to be stuck with 31,000, and so we've got to be really careful about what expenses come before us that might be needed for these unexplained projects.
Can you temporarily dip into some of the other reserves?
Well, you can go into the regular budget.
Yeah.
I don't. Otherwise, the capital budget you probably can't.
Capital can only be used for capital projects.
Yeah, only for capital projects. So the other thing is, I asked Laura, and she's hiding from me now underneath the desk. But I had asked Laura to come up with the depletion of the unassigned reserves. I couldn't quite figure out. I don't see them. I didn't see them, and I checked a lot of different financials. And so she got me a report, and I assumed that we as a committee have to approve of all those unassigned reserves. But it may have been, some of them may have been prior to me, but I don't remember. I mean, we spent, well, engineering for boardwalk is 7,000, road and sidewalk maintenance for 84,000. Now, I don't remember saying anything like that, but maybe that was somebody else did. But and then there was the boardwalk, which I do remember. That's 517,000. Software licenses, I don't remember saying anything about that. That's only $770. And then there's some more engineering fees, downspout initiative, and attorney fees, which we did authorize. But I don't remember signing any of those. I don't remember the committee approving those, but maybe we did. Laura seems to think that maybe we did. Did any of the rest of you remember that?
I know we approved the downspout. That was the year.
Okay.
And I think we approved the boardwalk expenditure. However, my question about the boardwalk expenditure is, shouldn't that be charged to the capital reserves, and therefore not charged to the and that would give us $500,000 more in there.
I think we discussed that.
That should go. I guess Stephen isn't hearing us now, but it seems to me that that should go to the capital reserves,
Right.
which would give us plenty of room in the unassigned reserves if we can do that.
And I think we actually discussed that one more meeting and agreed to do that.
Yeah, the intent had always been for the boardwalk work to be part of capital, come out of capital reserves. That had always been the intent.
Well, that's something we would have to work through Laura again in order to get that changed over. There's also engineering fees for $7,000, which should go the same direction. Part of the same project. So,
Laura, is that
if in fact they can.
temporarily?
She's hiding. She's
Okay,
hiding.
What are you doing under there? Are you napping or what?
I'm trying to fix the sound issues. We're having a major issue right now. Anyone who's online cannot hear us. It's very staticky. We have a short in one of our cables, and somebody touched it, and now it's not working anymore.
Oh, man, okay. So anyway,
Can we ask you a question?
Yeah, I'm listening.
The question is, can we move the amount that was charged to the unassigned reserves to capital reserves, the part of it that involves the boardwalk?
I would have to go back and look and see exactly what that was spent on and how it was allocated and what those fees were for. But I can absolutely work with Steven and Sonia on that.
Okay. And Alan, seems to me that, you ought to.
Yeah, the big one would be the boardwalk reserve.
Yeah.
Yeah, the boardwalk came in significantly over budget.
well,
But it was a capital expense,
Right.
not,
Not an unassigned expense,
Right.
yeah.
I think it went under the other side.
Yeah, I'll work with Infomark to clarify that.
Okay.
well, again, since I'm fairly new to this group, I still think that unassigned reserve is important to keep at a pretty significant level for projects you don't know that's going to be coming up, and all of a sudden they come up and then we need money. But do you agree?
Agreed.
Okay.
all right,
And I think the intent, the kind of balances we were looking at, didn't, if we put the boardwalk work into capital reserves, I think that'll give us the kind of balances.
That'll replenish.
Replenishment.
Do you agree with that?
Yes,
If we get
absolutely.
the boardwalk?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Um,
Before we leave that, I have a question.
Yeah.
About a year and a half ago, we wanted to do some landscape work, and that's when Joe Schofield was still on the board. And the board approved $150,000 out of the unassigned
Right.
to do that. And then about 6 months ago, when Scott Charnock was still here, he made a presentation about landscaping needs coming up in the future to redo the community, et cetera, et cetera. And the board approved $350,000 to be set aside for that. So personally, I don't think we need that kind of money. I mean, is that money still sitting out there allocated where we could put it back in unassigned reserves, or where is that money?
That was never spent.
No. Well, we haven't had a committee to spend it yet.
Sure. Oh, okay, that makes sense.
But again, if you add those up, that comes out to $500,000, and there's no way, at least in the foreseeable future, we're going to spend that amount of money to refurbish Pelican Preserve's landscaping. So if that is being allocated and held out there, some of those funds.
if it was simply approved,
Yeah.
there's no money
There's
sitting
no
anyplace.
money sitting, yeah.
It's just, we'd have to find it. We're not going to be able to find it
Okay.
now in unassigned reserves.
Okay.
So we'd have to come up someplace else with the money. If there's nothing else, I think that's it for that. Later on, I want to bring up the security issues. Okay, thank you.
Laura, did you get us back online?
Yes. Stephen Bloom said that he couldn't really hear when we were talking, so I was chatting with him. I told him that you were questioning the money that was moved from the unassigned reserves for the boardwalk instead of pulling it from capital reserves. So Stephen, if you want to chime in on that, is there a way that we can change the way that was done?
Yes, good afternoon, Stephen Bloom. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Great, okay. So I do want to, I apologize if I'm answering a question that wasn't quite asked. I heard some of it starting with my name, so that certainly made my ears perk up. I think the short answer is you can absolutely make those adjustments to that. Another piece of information is just because an item in your current year is capital related does not mean it will automatically be pulled from the capital reserve. That when you reserve something, that is reserved until you provide direction to use that money. So we don't automatically say, okay, well, that's clearly capital, we're going to pull it out. But what we do is similar to what the discussion you're having right now. Is the end of the year, during the audit, then we will, say, okay, X amount we want to use from this, X amount we want to use from that, make these adjustments. So in summary, absolutely, you can still make those adjustments. Certainly you can take it out of the capital reserve to cover the boardwalk. It's certainly a great idea. The other thing I wanted to mention, just kind of briefly here, I believe you're looking at November's financials, which is before you first get your big assessment numbers in. But your December number in terms of unassigned is much larger. It's like almost $1.5 million. So once you move the reserve out of for the boardwalk, you'll be fine in general. But obviously, right now you're still fine because you got your early assessment money in, and there really isn't any kind of concern in terms of having to need something.
Stephen, I must admit, this is Phil, I'm a little confused. The assessment money, isn't that part of our operating expenses?
It is, but it sits in unassigned until it's used.
Hmm.
In other words, if, let's say, for example, you looked at your budget and this happens and decided, you know what, for whatever reason, this particular line item, we're not going to use all of it for whatever it is. We want to reassign it to something else. That's where that kind of works out. You still have that money as unassigned. Whereas if that money came in and was assigned to something or even restricted to something, you don't have that same flexibility. But you're absolutely correct. It's not like you're going to be taking that money that's coming in for your current year and start, using it for a $500,000 project.
My suggestion is, Alan, that maybe you and the KW financial people review, that unassigned.
That would not
Yeah.
be a KW. Sorry to interrupt. That's district unassigned.
Yeah,
That's the district's money that's in your 002 fund, not what KW would handle. That would be what we handle.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'm suggesting that it be reviewed so we know how much we still have left for unassigned.
I understand, but I'm just saying KW would not be part of that discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen, are you saying though, next month, how much is going to be in the unassigned reserve?
The total is about 1.5 million. And as Phil correctly stated, that is a combination of prior year carryover unassigned plus whatever came in so far for this year. So it's a combination of the two numbers that will be put into that bucket.
So why is the reserve so low this month?
Because your first set of money that comes in doesn't come in until the really big money starts coming in early December. Even though, yeah, that's when the tax collector sends the money in. It's obviously collected in November on their end for discounts and stuff, but it doesn't get moved over into the district's bank accounts until December.
Alan, are you all right with this?
Well, I'm a little bit confused yet. I understand the money that that was saved for the last year's budget goes into unassigned reserve. What is this? What is the other money? Where's the other money coming from again? Give me, just the ad valorem tax.
Non-ad valorem. Yes, the non-ad valorem that's coming in
Yeah.
for 2023. It has to be put into some classification, and the classification is unassigned. But again,
you're saying we can't use it for major projects.
well, no, that's why you have other reserves that you've established over the years to pull from.
Well, I mean, we spent 515,000 for the of that money for the boardwalks, and so I'm just questioning what we can actually use it for then. If we're going to have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I think to the earlier point, I don't want to get that lost in this discussion. That moving of that $500,000 or whatever that number is out of the capital reserve into unassigned or vice versa, however you want to look at it. Now your prior year or your carryover number goes from 31,000, and again we're estimating to 531,000. of unassigned carryover money that then you can classify, for other larger projects that, again, you've got different buckets here. You've got ponds, you've got this unassigned we talked about, and you got capital reserves. If you have a large project that you're concerned about, that's where you would start with, is your capital reserves. The unassigned is, as somebody mentioned, kind of a little bit here and there, maybe something a little bit above the budget that you weren't really expecting. Any of this large stuff is why you're putting money away into your capital reserves. That's the exact reason for it.
All right, given Stephen's explanation, what is the committee's wishes as far as whether or not to still transfer that 500,000 back to capital?
I would think it still
Yes,
makes
I would think
sense.
so, yeah.
Okay,
It's a
Definitely.
capital-
I definitely think
That's
it would make sense.
That's where it belongs.
all right, and is Laura the one that does that?
I am. I request it from Infomark. You make the decision, you vote on
Okay.
it, and then I request it.
All right, so I guess it's up to a vote?
Well,
wanna
can
make-
I just ask another clarifying? Stephen, this is Peggy Hall. So if we end up saying that we want something pulled out of the capital reserve fund versus the unassigned, that will then be vetted by the auditor, correct? So that if we've
Absolutely.
inappropriately moved it, it would
Yeah.
get flagged, come back to us.
Yes.
Okay, so
It
we can't
would.
make a mistake with this, is what I'm asking.
Right, and then all, quite frankly, all of your expenditures are subject to the auditor reviewing, to make sure that they're valid district, expenditures, not just
Oh.
capital. But to answer your question, yes.
It did, thank you.
You want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we move from unassigned reserves, the $7,000 for engineering fees.
I need to
and
double check that because you had engineering fees above and beyond the boardwalk last year that you
It
went
says
over.
engineering fees dash boardwalk.
Okay, I'll clarify that. I'll verify that, I should say.
All
Okay.
right. And the $517,250 from the boardwalk work, move it to capital funds.
Move it
I'll
from,
second
let me clarify, you want to move it from capital reserve
No.
to unassigned because we took it out of unassigned.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
Yes. I want to move it from unassigned or from capital to unassigned. Yes.
Stephen, I will send you an official, oh wait, you got to vote on it first, sorry.
You second it?
I did second that.
Okay, we take a vote?
Aye.
Any further
Aye.
discussion?
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay, I will work with Infomark tomorrow to get that transferred. It will show up in your January financials.
Further, I would suggest that maybe, Alan, it would be a good idea for you to sit down with Laura and look if there are any other funds. There's anything else that we expended during 2022 that should go to capital reserves.
I have all those in front of me here that Laura gave me. The only one that had to do with road and sidewalk maintenance, and Peggy remembers.
No, I remember the drainage.
Oh, the drainage, okay.
That was fine.
Road and sidewalk, was that approved by this committee?
Any moves out of that account were approved by PPAC. I would not take any money from your reserves without your permission.
I might not have been here when you did that, but that's something you probably wouldn't move to capital. Anyway.
It would depend on if it was a repair or if it was like improvements don't necessarily come out of capital. It depends on the job.
And to me, it's 84,000, which isn't a huge number. I mean, it's still a lot of money, but it's not a huge number to worry about at this particular point. And as long as we're getting more money back in, according to Steve, I think we'll be fine.
Right now, I have it on the screen. This is the December 31st financials, which I received yesterday. Whereas he stated, if you look under this second column right here, you're at 1.5 rounded up in your unassigned.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions regarding financial? If not, I think we can move on. Tony, are you?
No, we're gonna have Doug go. He can hear us now because I forgot I unmuted us. Doug Zanter. Doug, if you can hear us.
No, Doug?
He's muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to cover the ponds update, and I asked to be put on upfront because of the fact that I'm actually on the beach in Cabo, but I called in to cover the update.
It's a hard life.
Good for you,
Yeah.
Doug.
I was just to start with. I'm got my version of it up. I assume that you're seeing the up January update. The first part of the update is the financials. Uh, if you look at that, is it there on the screen,
Yes,
Laura? Okay.
yes, I have.
If you look at that, it's 50% of our budget for the year is already purchased, which is the ongoing yearly contracts we have with our vendors. Uh, and then you see the billed amounts very small because it's early in the year. But 50% of the $798,000 has been allocated, and there's an extra $320,000 there for regular expenses that are not ongoing. I get this report from Laura, I think, every other week, and I update it in this report to you monthly. So that's where we're at right now. The drainage project, year seven, that was approved a while back by CDD is year seven. We've started in Prado and Pistoia on probably another 3 months. We should complete this year. The money we have allocated to it this year. And then we will come back again this time a year from now and start year eight, which will be our last year in the drainage project. Solitude issues where their lead individual, the management, and their lead actually quit, went to work for another company. Solitude took a while, but they actually got back with us and gave us contacts for the management. And I believe we are okay right now from where we're at. I really, the next point I said I asked for approval, but I'm really, it's in, and you can get rid of K on the agenda. I'm just telling you what we're doing right now. We're not going to spend money right now, but we're going and looking at all the new Pelican ponds, to look at erosion on those ponds, because those were ponds that we really did not do the drainage project until just recently. But we're going to go look at those ponds, look at the littorals, and see what issues might be there and what issues we need to address. We're going to do that to start with, just like Gateway did this on their ponds just recently. They did it with staff. And then after they completed that, they had Tetra Tech look at their results just as I guess you would call it, a level set to make sure that they're out, what they viewed the issues were that Tetra Tech agreed with. We are going to do the same type of concept. To start with, we will have one of our subcommittee members and then a couple of the volunteers that are not on the subcommittee to go inspect all the ponds in New Pelican and say what issues might need to be resolved. And then we'll have Tetra Tech validate that, and then we'll put a plan in place. To have Tetra Tech validate that, I will need some money, and I will come back at that point to the PPAC to ask for that money. But that's our plan. We've had a few individuals complaining about the ponds in New Pelican. Uh, and in fact, the largest complaint is coming from Joe Schofield, but we're going to do it with Tetra Tech to get emotion out of it. A lot of times we might go out and look at ponds and then people complain, well, why did you select this pond as the worst pond? We're going to have unbiased Tetra Tech validate the data that we collect. So that's and the last thing on the list was the aeration power reduction plan. We've started that. I'll call it right sizing. We've run a little bit of a snag, and Peggy can tell you a little bit about it. But the person running that project, our lead person, actually had a back problem, and it's delayed how quickly we were doing that. But We're in the process of implementing the reduction in power, and I'll call it right sizing. Any questions on any of this?
Yeah, Doug, when do you foresee the work on, when you've finished your study for the ponds, when do you foresee actual work beginning to make the changes that come out of that study?
What I think we'll be able to do, I'll have to look at the budget and see what I can do for this calendar year budget within the 798. Uh, and I do have some in there. I could adjust some of the drainage project and spread a little year 7 into year 8 to be able to do that. I'd like to get at least the worst pond and start a project on that, and then going forward, to build a plan that will address all the issues. And that might take, and that will take multiple years depending upon how many issues come up.
Right.
All
We
right.
need to get the data in from our analysis before we can
Yeah.
really talk about it.
Yeah. I could see us being able to, back to the point, Phil, I could see us getting one pond, the worst pond, and be able to address that quickly. The rest of the stuff, we're going to have a longer range plan.
So,
Right.
Mr. Gregg, I believe that Doug was asking, he was saying that item 7K, we would not need to go over because he said they're going to have volunteers do that at this point.
At least to start with, and we'll come back when we need Tetra Tech and ask for the money for, because we don't know how much. Laura and I talked about that already, is the fact that you usually don't go ask for approval before you know how much it's going to cost.
So item 7K, we can skip in the agenda.
You may be skipping a lot at the Any other questions for Doug? Doug, if you have nothing else, we can move on to Tony.
Actually,
Thank you.
Zach.
Mr. Gregory, Zach Lombardo will be making the presentation. Zach's one of our attorneys that does land use, local government, CDD work. Did work with him in Lenore, many gateway issues over the last couple of years. And Zach's very familiar with the Sunshine Law. And I think he's also more tech savvy than anybody else in our office. So.
All right. And with that endorsement, I'll start by not knowing what a
Introduce
PowerPoint
yourself
is.
again.
Yeah, sure. While we locate the PowerPoint, my name is Zach Lombardo. I'm an associate at Woodward Peters Lombardo. I work with Tony on a lot of local government matters, a lot of sunshine law issues, public records. And today, since there are new members, we were going to do a short recap of the sunshine law portion of the presentation.
Before you get into that,
Sure.
I just want to ask a question. Tony, I had suggested to John that we alter the agenda to put the discussion of the boardwalk access right after the sunshine law training so that we would have you available for that, because there are some legal issues that I think we need to have somebody opine on as we may have that discussion. And so would you hang on, or would you have Zach make those?
Yeah, I would like to volunteer and sacrifice Zach, but I will hang around for that. Yes.
Good. Okay. Thank you. That would be good to have you, because
Zach thanks me also.
Yes. Sorry. For the record, yes. Thank you. Tony, could you email the presentation to Laura? We are having some technical issues here.
It is missing from the folder.
And while it's missing from the folder, I will start anyway and give you the background here. So basically, the Sunshine Law is something in its modern form that shows up in the late 1960s. And I think it's helpful to understand what problem was trying to be solved, so that way you can understand kind of the onerous nature of some of these requirements. Prior to that point, there was a fairly commonplace activity called a executive session. And essentially local governments would meet not in the public, make a lot of decisions and explain why they're making decisions. And then they would sit in the public and just vote. And this was deemed to be not in the best interest of expeditiously spending public funds. And so a massive overhaul of the Florida Constitution and all of the statutes takes place sort of at the end of the 1960s. And what we get is a very nicely named Sunshine Law. And as we dive into it, we'll see that it can lead to some pretty what appear to be economically inefficient ways of doing business. But the point is not to run an efficient business. The point is to run a business that can be verified in the public. And so I think the easiest way to think about what all these requirements do is something that you may have been told in 7th grade in your geometry class, which was it doesn't matter what the answer to the question is, it matters that you show your work. And so basically all of these requirements are trying to put onto the, put onto the record why the decision is being made. And so for starters, and while we're waiting on this presentation here, you all are regulated by the Sunshine Law, and it's because you're an advisory board. You make recommendations to Gateway, which makes the ultimate decision. And if you think that that's strange, the idea is Gateway may not engage in a serious deliberation because they're just going to accept whatever you told them, perhaps. And so if someone's trying to figure out, well, why did we do this? They need to go back and look at your presentation and see, well, this is where the discussion was had. And so even though you are not voting in definitive measure at times, you're just recommending, it's still important to preserve the workflow of the Pythagorean theorem that is the Sunshine Law. So we found it?
Tony sent it.
Yes, here we go. So if you look at the screen here, and Tony even sent me with this laser pointer. Oh, it doesn't work on
It doesn't work on the
screen.
TV.
Tony. All right.
Tony
well,
knew that too because he tried it when he was
No,
here.
it worked last time. It worked with at the board meeting.
I'm just going to point.
Only if you give me the thing.
I'll give you.
It's not. There's a no. It's Zach. It's not the power. There's a PowerPoint, not the laser. It's the little arrows on the side.
Well, I like any other cat, I was really excited about the laser.
It works on the wall, but not on the screen.
Okay,
You have
so
to turn
here
it
we
on
go.
first.
There you go.
Okay, so as usual, as attorneys, we like to start with disclaimers. What I'm going to tell you is going to be the overview. If you have specific questions, we recommend reaching out to us, ideally with as much lead time before you have the question so that we can get a good answer. Oops.
Doesn't work. I can click through.
Next slide, please.
All right. Maybe.
Oh.
There you go.
Yes. This is a nice recreation of the executive session. Which is what we already discussed. So let's just move into the presentation. So as stated prior, this is entrenched in the Florida Constitution, and then it's implemented by the Florida statutes, and it regulates all local governments. This is counties, cities, and then what is happening here is a special district and an advisory board of same. Let's go to the next slide. Here's the actual constitutional text. The defined term here is collegial public body. Let's move on to the next slide, though, so we can get into the details. Maybe I can do this. Hold on. The statute site, in case you really enjoy reading the statutes, is 286.011. Aha.
There you go.
And let me get to this is the main important slide. There are three major requirements to be in compliance with the Sunshine Law, and all of these go back to the concept of making sure it can be figured out what happened. The first one is that the meeting has to be open to the public, and we can just look at what's happening right now. This is a meeting subject to the Sunshine Law. The public is here. Anybody who didn't show up could have shown up. And we'll get into a little bit more about what happens if you expect large attendance. Notice
Please on this number 239.
Someone needs to mute. Tony, could you mute? Tony, could you mute? Reasonable notice of the meetings have to be given. Usually this is in the form of the agenda being posted. And so typically if you anticipate a question, it's probably when you see the agenda, you might have a question. That would be a great time to reach out to counsel to ask it. And then the minutes of the meeting have to be taken and promptly recorded. And so the way I look at this is there's two major things we're doing here, and it's really 1 and 3. 1 is making sure that people can show up and put their input into the decision. And 3 is really more a post hoc situation of trying to figure out why did things happen the way they happened. And this can be very useful if there's litigation, or even if we're just trying to figure out why something happened a particular way. So let's see here.
Zach, does the statute specify the the length of reasonable notice for the meetings?
It does not, and as you imagine, this is to the great delight of attorneys, because that means that there is a body of case law that is developed to figure out what reasonable notice is. So
No,
sometimes
Zach, for clarification, as to committees, the statute does not indicate that. As to the meetings of the board, there's a separate statute that talks about we can publish our meeting schedule annually. And if we have a special meeting, it has to be in the paper 7 days in advance. And
so for
then,
special
yeah, then there are some other specific statutory timeframes depending upon the action to be taken.
but for the advisory committee, there is not statutory guidance. So as far as determining when the sunshine law is triggered, the question is two or more. So if any two of you all gather, there's a potential that it will apply. And then we have to ask the next question, which is, what are you talking about? And if you're talking about something that could foreseeably come before you in the context of sitting on this board, then that is a conversation that legally cannot happen. It would be a violation of the sunshine law, and it should happen here. This is, I think, one of the major points that causes some friction, especially with people who are used to operating in business spaces or even in HOA spaces where you can sit down, you can talk through with one-on-one with other board members, and then come back to the meeting. That's not permissible under the sunshine law. So it's really important to take the opportunity that these meetings are and make sure you get it all out and talk through everything, because this is the only chance that you have to converse with your colleagues on this board. Now, I guess I want to
Yeah,
that.
if I could
Yes.
just chime in briefly on that. We take a very conservative approach, as it's indicated, that even if you think you've taken final action on something today, invariably it will come back up again. So that even if you've taken action on an item today, our guidance always is do not discuss any district business, anything involving the district outside of a notice public meeting, because items come back up constantly, routinely.
Yeah, and that's a good clarification. So this says foreseeably, and Tony's counseling that we should also just not rehash things that have already been discussed, because everything can come back over and over again, especially in a legislative context. Now, I guess the obvious example here is this does not mean you cannot speak to each other and say hello should you be in Publix or anywhere else. The guiding framework that I think helps in thinking about sunshine law and also the ethics laws, which we aren't going into today, is kind of like the appearance of impropriety. So obviously, if someone sees you talking to another board member in Publix, they may conclude, aha, I knew it. they're canoodling. And so to prevent the accusations of canoodling, we just generally suggest to avoid too much prolonged conversation. But at the end of the day, the standard is just, are you discussing something that's on an agenda? Let's get to the next slide. Oops, sorry.
That was me.
I'm working again here.
All right.
Yeah, it's I think it starts with a C. Anyway. So this is we talked about this a little bit at the beginning. This is what kinds of boards does this apply to, and this kind of issue came up earlier with not all, everyone was here on the board at the time, but there was questions about what kinds of boards are regulated by the sunshine. You certainly are as an advisory board, but if there were to be subcommittees in certain contexts, those can be also regulated by the sunshine law. And so as things go forward, we can talk about what considerations should be made. But a lot of this can then go back to that geometry problem. Is the full decision-making process on the record or not? If it is, we're probably compliant. If it's not, we're probably not compliant. Let's see here. So, and again, on this example, the board is certainly subject, but you are also subject as an advisory committee. There are some examples of outside of scope concepts like fact-finding committees. And so this is just in a sense, out of pure necessity. If absolutely everything had to be in the sunshine, you would absolutely not be able to do anything. You need to be able to get information. And so one of the types of committees that you could create or that could exist or the board could create is a fact-finding committee. And those committees can go out and gather information, but they are basically gatherers purely. That information must be brought to a public meeting to be analyzed and discussed. It cannot be the case that the information is filtered really in any way, because then it gets into that decision-making process. I'm on this particular issue, I believe, but Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, that there are some fact-finding committees associated with PPAC. So this usually does not apply, but in this particular situation it does. And so they would
Yeah,
come.
we have had many conversations with regards to changing the nature and scope of what used to be the various work groups to the committees and the subcommittee level. And then there might be some individual fact finding opportunities, but those are purely fact finding. And I think the committee members have a very good handle on that. It's not recommendatory, not advisory at all.
So, and the other things that are on here, for example, you have staff. Staff obviously is able to work without constantly being in a public meeting. And then, of course, just worth noting, if you're going to write the rules, don't make them apply to yourself. The legislature is not subject to the sunshine. The judiciary is not, but I think that's a little bit more defensible. There's a lot more. There's a different type of decision being made there. In public policy decisions, it perhaps makes sense to show the work. As far as discussing who exactly is subject to this, we have obviously the sitting members, but also members-elect, incumbent candidates. The only person who is outside that is maybe running for the board is the non-incumbent candidate. But I don't know that we're in a period where that is very applicable to you right now because you're all on the board, but just so you know, it's not just the board members. And this applies with the district board. When the district board has elections, the incumbents, if they're rerunning, are subject. And then in that period of time where their members elect, they're subject to the sunshine law. Now, what this does not apply to, it's another sort of exception, is different boards and committees. So if you all want to interact, if one of you wants to interact with one member of the district board, that is not a sunshine law triggering event. Now, should there be two on either side of that equation, it's a sunshine law issue. But you can have that one-on-one discussion, and it's definitely onerous, but this is part of the process here. The other thing to note here is delegation, which I don't know if that's on the next slide or just referenced on the bottom of this one.
Oh, can you see?
Oh, look at that. If the board delegates the board can't delegate a decision to be made outside of the sunshine to one person. And so that's just as far as when you're thinking about can one person go do something. If you're by yourself, it doesn't necessarily mean you're outside of the sunshine, but most likely, especially in the context of the advisory board, you likely are. Staff, you can meet with staff as much as you want. Which I think staff is thrilled to hear.
They may have something to say about
From a
that.
sunshine law perspective, maybe there are other policies or guidance from the board, prudence, but yeah. Well, you're fun to hang out with. But it's not a sunshine law issue. And now there's one notable caveat, and this goes back to the show your work concept, which is if staff is being used as a liaison, and really if anyone's being used as a liaison, there's a problem. And what I mean by that is if you ask Laura, what did everybody else say about this? Now you're back to that problem, right? And that same thing could happen if you were talking to a board member. You could talk to a board member and say, well, did anybody else from PPAC talk to you, and what did they say? That's out, that you're inviting a sunshine law violation, and it's simple enough to think about, because the idea is if you want to know what anybody else on PPAC thinks, we do it here at the board meeting. So let's see here. This is just a summary of board meetings, and we kind of hit some of these things earlier, starting from the bottom up. Social interaction is not a problem. The legislature has tried to very much regulate you, but they did stop there. You can go to parties, which is important. And this also covers the public side of the house. But again, I just caution you on the perception, because where these complaints are going to come from is usually just going to be some community member who's going to insist that they saw you somewhere doing something you shouldn't have been doing. As far as other types of meetings, if you're going to other board meetings, so for example, if you're going to the board meeting, it's not a violation it depends on kind of what happens at the board meeting, but all these meetings are noticed. So there really shouldn't be an issue. I just saw there was a board member here, I believe he left, but these are noticed meetings. And so that's not really the question. Really more the hot one is community forums. If a interest group throws a forum and invites a bunch of public officials to the forum, that can potentially create a problem, because there might be a discussion session and then they could be asked because they're on the board. And most people don't think that you can't talk about this, because if you think about the higher profile political offices like the legislature and the US Congress, they're always talking to everybody in any kind of cluster of groupings, and no one seems to care. So it's a little counterintuitive, I think, for most people to realize that at a local government level, two people talking in the same room about something is a problem. And so the community, yes, go ahead.
Social media, how does that play into it?
So on the social media side of the house, is it the next slide?
But before we get there, just briefly, if I can go back, the part about the committee members appearing at other board meetings, the notice that we place in the paper for all board of supervisors meetings specifically mentions that members of other committees may be in attendance and may participate. So at board of supervisors meetings, we provided the appropriate notice that 2 or more members of PPAC, 2 more members of other committees may be present at that noticed public meeting, and then there can be that interaction. So we covered that at supervisor meetings. I'm sorry.
So, well, no, that's a good clarification. So going into your question, I guess I'm going to fling it back to you. Do you think that it is a sunshine law issue to the board? That's my question to you all.
I think it would depend on the situation.
So the answer is it's a problem. And it's the same concept as the showing your work. If it's a discussion, it doesn't need to be an oral discussion. So it could be a written discussion. So text messages, social media posts, where there have been some actual violations that made the news, where there's been a couple examples of fact-finding trips where 2 board members go to take a look at something together, and they go to look at one of the ponds together and talk about it. Those have actually been found to be violations. But social media posts you cannot interact with that. I'm not sure, Tony, if there's a district policy on elected official social media accounts.
Well, the courts have interpreted the fact that a social media post, again, you can't have any interaction. That's why we typically frown against any public officials, committee members, any advisory committee members having any interaction with any social media with any other board members or any other issues involving the district, because it is then a meeting contrary to the Sunshine Law and violates the Sunshine Law, because not every member of the public can access that. And again, that's an area where you always, again, take a very conservative approach, that do not participate on the social media post if it involves district business, and there are other board members or committee members that are posting. Nextdoor is really notorious for that.
And the last one I want to flag on this one, because I know we're pushing time here, is the inaudible discussions one is an interesting point that goes back to the public's comment. We provided, I don't know if it says below, it must be in the material somewhere, but we can get you an example of the Sebastian City Council article, where the city of Sebastian, there were 2 board members that were seen to be talking. It was never made clear what they were talking about. And the conclusion was, well, because we weren't really sure what was going on, we think that it may have been a Sunshine Law violation. So I would just caution you, and we're a law firm, we always caution conservative behavior. But in this case, this is public service, and thank you for doing this. But part of the way Florida structures this is we just want to make sure everybody sitting over here and everybody who didn't bother to show up to the meeting today can figure out, or everyone remotely can figure out, why were things done? How are the public monies being spent? Let's see if there's any other notable exceptions. This is really more, I think, relevant to the district, but sometimes when there's pending litigation, the district, the board can meet in what's called the shade, because we got to keep the metaphor moving. And these are called attorney-client sessions, but they're typically called shade meetings. But I think this piece of information will help you see how serious the legislature is about this. Even when the board is being sued, or the board is suing someone, even though they can meet in private with their attorneys and their chief executive officer to decide and discuss the litigation, there's a court reporter present, and every single thing that is discussed is transcribed. And as soon as the litigation concludes, the transcript becomes a public record. So I think that goes a long way to show how intense these laws are, and how committed everyone is to making sure that these things are open. Let's see here. There are a couple very specific exceptions that are security based. So, for example, if you all were reviewing a security or fire safety system plan, which I don't know that's within your purview, but there are certain very specific things that would fall out of the sunshine for safety reasons. That's something that you would rely on us to, or you'd rely on staff to flag that before it happens. Let's see here. We talked about closed door sessions. I'm not going to go into too much into the details on that. So that's kind of that first one is it needs to happen here on the notice and agenda, which we got into a little bit earlier. Let's see if there's anything new on here we need to cover.
Yeah, Zach, I think the important part is the Sunshine Law requires reasonable notice, but there's specific statutory provisions for notice, as we talked about before. And that's what this slide represents.
So let's see here.
And getting back to the issue about the possibility of a closed door session, at times, items such as security matters, the board has the ability, if they're talking about, for example, placing cameras around the governmental buildings for purposes of controlling access or securing the facility, that can be a closed, but it has to be recorded and the record kept confidential. So at some point in time, they may become public, but generally the consideration is maintain confidential. A lot of that is reaction to 9/11, so that
Yes.
terrorists don't get a hold of plans and operational manuals for governmental facilities.
So that's how when is the Sunshine Law applicable? Who is it applicable to? How does the agendaing work? And then a little bit on location. And some of these things, these are just informational. Obviously, staff is setting these things up. But another demonstration of the commitment to the openness here. If a government anticipates a large crowd for a particular issue, there actually are requirements to either get a larger venue or provide other methods of participating. Sometimes, for example, in some of the larger county meetings, they'll set up different rooms with TVs and have a system to move people back and forth for public comment. So it's a pretty serious commitment to openness. This is kind of not exactly, I guess it's a Sunshine Law question. What if you can't attend the meeting in person? The general rule here is if there's a physical quorum, a motion can be made to allow someone to appear telephonically or by video. As far as I'm aware, all of Gateway's meetings are video conferenced, and so this is usually not an issue as long as there's a physical quorum. Minutes. That was the active piece. The minutes are kind of the memory, right? The minutes have to be taken, and the point of this is to just record what happened, why it happened, who said what about it. And they have to be available to the public. We're not going into public records here today, but they are certainly public records. As far from a statutory perspective, they can be a summary or verbatim. I don't know which Gateway chooses to go with. Summary. You'll notice that some local governments have court reporters at every single meeting, and they just transcribe everything. There's obviously a cost to that, though. Failure. Let's get to the stick, if you will. There are criminal penalties here. There's removal from office. There are infractions. It depends. There's a lot of factual pieces of information that are needed to sort of decide where would you land on the dartboard of criminal to non-criminal infraction. But I think there's things like if this was done because there was some other complicating factor like a bribe, that obviously that's more towards the top of the spectrum. If it was not as serious, it may be lower towards it. But I think the takeaway on this slide is it is bad. And there are real consequences. And considering I don't think that most local government officials are being heavily compensated to be doing this, it does not pass the cost-benefit analysis. And as long as we stay focused on, it's public service and we all need to avoid it. But it has also consequences for the board itself, which is that it invalidates actions. And so I would suggest that there's an important way to think about this, which is if you feel very strongly about something happening, and there is a Sunshine Law issue, the thing may not happen because it may be invalidated based on a Sunshine Law challenge. So on important issues, it's even more critical to really make sure that this is meticulously followed, because what the courts have said is you cannot just rubber stamp the action to correct it. You have to work through it in the public, and in certain situations, timing can be important, and that may create a serious issue. Here, just I mean, we like the local news here. Cape Coral had a ethics issue involving this, although this was it was criminal, but it ended up only being $100 fine. So this is probably not the slide we should show you, because that does look like a slap on the wrist, but it was fairly serious. We have a bunch of links to all kinds of examples of fines and people being arrested for these issues. And so, again, back to that slide, we shouldn't, hopefully that's not what motivates you. And the idea is we're here to work in the public trust, and these are the rules that we follow to make sure it gets done. We have resources on the slide, which is, I think, can that be put in the materials if it's not? So they have
We
it.
can share that. Yes.
So you'll have the slide. There are links. There's lots of stuff you can dive into if you thought that you really wanted to. I would say that the 2022 Sunshine Manual is an incredible, and it's actually fairly easy to read from a non-attorney perspective, which I feel confident that I can say that. But it really covers every imaginable scenario. It's a really great book if you have questions. But really, if you have questions, it's our advice that you come to us with your questions. So that you can be more like this guy here, who is so transparent that he does not cast a shadow. So does anyone have any questions about the presentation? Tony, I went 8 minutes over, but you did interrupt me, so I feel that I can't be solely responsible for that. Any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Okay.
Questions from the audience?
I have a quick one. Just to
You have to come up, please come up to the podium.
That's right. Yeah, right.
Well, it's not so much the people in the room, it's the people online.
Kathleen Anderson, president of BILA. So my question was just to clarify, it can't even be two, correct? If two or more.
Yeah, it cannot even be two. So this is back to the geometry, this is the greater than or equal to. All right, well, thank you very much. That was the Zach and Tony show. I'll let Tony handle the rest of this, and I look forward to seeing you all and hearing about all the great work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Zach.
He just mentioned Tony is going to.
Yeah, he's hanging around. He's going to address the additional questions. But our presentation is concluded. Thank you.
Any other questions? If there are no more questions, we can go on.
I think there was a request to move item 7C next, and then before item 7B, since Tony's already on the line. I could be wrong, but that's what I thought I heard.
Yes, I have that too. Pelican Preserve Boardwalk access, Phil?
Well, this isn't necessarily just my baby, but it seems to me that we have a number of considerations here. There are a certain amount of complication because this issue comes up both as a South Florida Water Management District rules cover some of this. And then we also have rules, access considerations from the Americans for Disability Act. So those need to be considered. It seems to me that maybe our best approach to this would be to determine what kind of vehicles or people we want to allow access to the boardwalk, have access to the boardwalk, and those that we don't want to have access to the boardwalk. The South Florida Water Management District, in issuing the permit for us, said that it's got to be restricted to pedestrians, but they don't define pedestrian. ADA has some definitions. I guess maybe they're not a pedestrian, but of things that are allowed, and those need to be considered as well. So I would suggest we maybe start with looking at the little thing I gave you with boardwalk access considerations. I think right at this point, I'd like to be clear, and I'm not sure that I am, on what rules really are in place. We have said pedestrians only, but apparently there are people taking bicycles onto the boardwalk. There are people taking other kinds of vehicles onto the boardwalk. So I'd be interested in input from the committee as to what you think we should allow and not allow. Golf carts being, of course, a big issue. Are people, I would suggest that we probably don't want to allow golf carts. And if we did, we would have to go back to the South Florida Water Management District and we'd have to do a study and go back to the district and ask for changes. Right at this point, these are not allowed.
Speaking on behalf of the district, at this point, we are not interested in taking up a fight over this with South Florida. So I think the important thing, there was some discussion this afternoon that we could go back to South Florida to have them clarify what they consider ADA mobility devices, what methods of access to the boardwalk they would consider covered under ADA access, which we have to honor. We have to be very careful. Our permit is very specific as far as what it does and does not allow on the boardwalk. We do not want to fight South Florida over saying, well, we want to have this, when you said no. We want to find out what they will let us have. That's a fight for another day, not something we're willing to take up right now. We have a lot of projects coming up. We need their cooperation. We want to work well with them. We don't want to be difficult. So we feel that it's in our best interest to ask them to clarify what they would allow on the boardwalk, rather than saying, we want to have this, but you said no, change your mind. If that makes sense.
It makes sense. It seems to me it's important that we publish that information. Right now, people don't know exactly what is and is not allowed.
Correct. We haven't had that clarified either, so that's what we would need to do that. And then once we had that information, I completely agree it does need to be published, because we've gotten some answers as far as what things are not allowed, but we haven't gotten very clear definition on what is allowed. Obviously, wheelchairs are allowed. We can't restrict wheelchairs, but to the best of my knowledge, skateboards, bicycles are not considered pedestrian, so those are not allowed.
I think it would be very important to get what is allowed according to our permit, because then you post that and say, that's it.
Per the permit.
The onus is on the state of Florida instead of us as to what's allowed.
I agree.
But don't we open ourselves up to any kind of concern on the ADA then if we say nothing other than wheelchairs?
Well, we are abiding by our permit, and if South Florida says they're not gonna, for some reason, I don't know why they wouldn't, but if they would say that they're not going to comply with ADA for some reason, or they're not gonna, whatever, we have to abide by our permit. So if South Florida says this is what we can have on there and this is what we can't have on there, at this point in time, that's what we need to do. We want to make sure we're not violating anything, and Tony can correct me if I'm wrong, and I know Zach is sitting here too. So if I stick my foot in my mouth, please let me know. But
Not to worry.
That's where we're at right now. Is staff's suggestion is for us to go to South Florida and say, what can we have on the boardwalk?
Specifically,
we know.
And on that point, in the memo that I attached, I went to unfortunately there is not a lot of clear guidance as to ADA. And if you go to try to research items such as I mentioned about the recumbent tricycle issue, you really don't get any really clear guidance from any materials. You get, I'll call these general statements. And I included in the materials, my memorandum.
The memo to Chelsea.
Yeah, to Chelsea, the state and local government memo, and then also another one dealing with issue about existing facilities. Because what's important is, and this is something that we're trying to convince and have a conversation with South Florida, that ADA applies to every governmental body, every state, and that state and local governments need to make reasonable modifications when necessary to accommodate people with disabilities. And so, and there's specific requirements in the ADA for that. So that, in fact, I highlighted the one section. It talks about the ADA says if you are part, I know this from the ADA website, the government website, it says if you are part of a state local government, you must make reasonable modifications to policies, practices, and procedures where needed to make sure that a person with a disability can access the state/local government's programs, services, or activities. That's on PDF page 9 of my memo to Chelsea dated December 30th. So I think that's a conversation with South Florida that we will probably have to try to convince them that, hey, listen, you all are subject to it. You're not exempt. Please show us the exemption. And again, there's various definitions about what's a mobility assist device, what's a power mobility assist device, and manual, assisting device. So again, I think right now that the way the board is operating, bicycles, skateboards, uh, seem to qualify as areas where the board can have a policy or rule that they're not allowed on there, that they are not quote unquote pedestrian uses. But so we'll get the ADA. Right now, I think it's on an ad hoc basis, and we may need to come up with some more detailed approach. But I think after we have that conversation with South Florida,
Who has that conversation?
the staff initially, the staff. I mean, there was a meeting back in April of this year where some of these issues came up. I was not allowed to participate because their general counsel's office did not have a representative, and they don't meet. It's a long story about when when an entity is represented by an attorney, you can't be there unless the other attorney consents. So anyway,
Laura, you made the comment that things like bicycles and skateboards are not considered pedestrian.
Correct.
So do we know those are already disallowed, at least?
According to the permit, yes. And they're not ADA. They're not an ADA
Yeah,
assisted device.
Okay. Is it possible that the South Florida Water Management District Board would allow something that we wouldn't want to allow?
The bicycles, they're the majority of the boardwalks or paths or anything like that in Lee County and in South Florida do not allow bicycles.
Mhm.
Period. It's not just ours that the restriction is on. In general, they don't. South Florida does not allow bicycles on them because it's not pedestrian.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not something that's unique to Gateway. This is pretty standard South Florida from what we're reading based on some other areas, and the access that their boardwalks and walkways are very similar to the same restrictions we have with our permits.
Mm-hmm. There have been suggestions made for ways of possibly going back to the district, South Florida Water Management District, and ask them for some kind of limited access provisions. And as a matter of fact, I happen to have with me a concept that was put forth. I'm not quite sure where it came from originally. I think the idea of finding out what we're allowed and not allowed to first is the thing to do.
I think that's most important that they were not very specific. So we're going to ask for some clarification and ask them to be more specific. The permit is vague in what it says. It just says pedestrian only traffic. It says no golf carts. We have to have the bollards, those kind of things, but it doesn't address like we had a resident who uses a tricycle for their mobility device. Well, technically bicycles are not allowed, but that's this person's mobility device, but there's an onus on them to provide proof that is their mobility device, and then we can't deny them under ADA. So that's the stuff that we need to clarify.
Phil, do you want to?
What's the best way for you to share this?
Please eliminate the over talk. It's really hard for people listening.
My concern is if you allow a tricycle or a bicycle for one person that may have a legitimate reason for it, people are going to see it and say, wait a minute, they're not following the rules, so now I don't need to follow the rules. And then you get a cascade of people saying, well, look at them, so I'm going to do it also, and I'm going to use my own bicycle.
No, I understood.
So it's, unless maybe you make, when we come up with our regulations or our what's going to be allowed and what's not going to be allowed, make a specific notation that there may be a resident or two that uses these specific bicycles because that's their only alternative for transportation. And so then people will maybe understand that there's, when they see it, they don't think, well, they can, so can I.
Understand.
Yeah, once we get clarification, I think we could send out an email to the entire community. Hopefully, most people
Here's
will
the-
read it and
Regarding the
understand.
tricycle.
Okay.
They have a burden of proof that
They can use it.
that is their mobility device.
Okay.
So it's not they can just
Sure.
say, this is my mobility device. They actually need to prove it.
All right, so let's Phil, I'd like Phil to show this.
Yeah, this is for, this I think will be for future consideration if we decide we want to go forward and get rules changed. What we're trying to find out now is what the rules are, and the staff is going to do that. But it's been suggested, and this is, well, this is the area anyway. This is the boardwalk. I think we're all fairly familiar with that. The suggestion has been that we perhaps allow, and you know where the Sienna side of the boardwalk is, that we perhaps allow things outside of the now allowed vehicles to enter the boardwalk, to go to the common area where people have picnics and meetings and that kind of thing, or they have had in the past. It's been suggested that maybe we should allow that, allow something like that to happen. Now, if we were to do that, we would have to go back and get permission from the district, the South Florida Water Management District. That would probably require a study, an environmental study, in order to get that done. But this is a relatively small area. The environmental studies has to take into account, as I remember it, 10 feet outside of the board, either side of the boardwalk. So I just present this for you to think about, for the PPAC to think about, as to whether, once we get a reading as to what we can and cannot do, whether we want to go back and ask the board to loosen the rules. So just for your information at this point.
Yeah, just one comment as a follow-up to the question about opening the floodgates. Again, there are always individuals that abuse the system and the processes, which is unfortunate. We see that all the time. As far as and Laura brought up and has up on the screen monitors for y'all the conclusion to my memo to Chelsea of December 30th about what the person, all they need to provide is credible assurance that the device is being used, and it explains it. So in this case, with the recumbent tricycle, we have a number of individuals, items, in their oars, or, and you can't ask about the nature or extent of the individual's disability. So again, hopefully people will be honest and not try to game the system. But unfortunately, as we all know, we see way too many people that buy little vests for their dogs. We see way too many people that borrow their parents' car with the sticker hanging from the mirror, and they're triathletes. So, and they park in handicap spots. So that's human nature, and we have to operate within those parameters, unfortunately.
Well, I would say, I don't know, Johnny, find out, the consensus of the committee is to do what the staff has recommended.
Okay. I took that as an action item. Realize that I may not have an answer for you next month. They don't move very fast, but staff will start working on it right away. Thank you.
Any other questions? Can we move on then? Next item on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, do you need my attendance any further, or may I be excused?
Any other questions for Tony? Nobody responded, so Tony, you can be excused unless you want to listen.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. I may listen, but y'all will be happy to know I'm stopping the meter. So.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Usual.
Oh, could I make a request? I guess I should have looked at the order of this. We also have Stephen Agapi on the line who is charging us for being there. So could we possibly bump item F?
If we're getting charged, let's bump item F.
Okay.
Item F is Tetra Tech task authorization.
John, we had agreed that I think that we need to have our roads, we are responsible for the roads, and that we probably need to have them evaluated to see whether work needs to be done. We are going to be getting, I guess it's item L now, on the thing to the Avila roads, where we have already, we have a contract to approve to get those roads done. The question is all the other roads, and we've had a lot of questions about that as to what we're going to do. And it seems to me that some kind of an evaluation of our roads as to whether they potentially need work would be well done, and that we should do it.
I have a couple questions regarding that. A lot of the communities, one is Pelican Preserve, Bellagio, they will do sealing on their own without even going for asking for CDD funds. And in most cases, those roads are going to last a lot longer than normal. Now, at Pelican Preserve, we do have problems. I mean, at Portofino, we do have problems in our cul-de-sac, but we repair that as needed. This is a touchy question that maybe it should be responded from each of the communities. I don't know an answer to this. Any other comments?
I agree. I'm part of Bellagio, and my HOAs are a little more expensive than when I used to be at Moderita, but I'm sure the roads are part of what I pay every quarter. And, maybe the main roads that are in between all of us, that's what we should be responsible for. But I believe the roads that are within each community, they should make sure that their roads are good because it's within their community, just like their landscaping. They've got their own landscapers. Why is the roads any different?
I agree with that.
And I have to take a counter opinion. I would say that, we need to start from a factual basis of what are the current conditions of our roads? What are our priorities for those, let's force rank what they are and what needs to be worked on. And then we can inform the communities to say, we have found that if you seal coat your roads, you will, gain 5 years. So that could inform the HOAs that if they don't want to be seeing their roads tied up.
I agree that we need to have an evaluation of all the roads.
Okay.
It would be beneficial that all the roads were done. But I think when it comes to cost of what we're providing to those each individual communities, I think each individual HOA should take some responsibility. If some of them are taking responsibility, why don't they all take responsibility? Why do some get?
What is our legal responsibility though as a tax-paying?
There's common roads for sure.
Right.
I would agree, but how about the individual?
Who's legally responsible?
The roads most of the roads belong to the CDD.
Right.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so if various communities choose to do work on them, that
That's
they
good for us.
certainly may do so. But I think there is, we're going to have, once we evaluate the roads, we are going to have to make a decision as to what are the criteria we will use to decide which roads we might want to work on, or maybe we don't want to work on them at all. That issue is clearly going to come up.
Are you saying that the criteria is the responsibility of our committee? I don't know if we have anybody on our committee that has that expertise.
No, well, we're going to have an evaluation done. And I'm just suggesting.
Engineer.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
suggesting, I'm not.
Review what the engineer.
Yes.
Review
That's
what the
what's on
engineers have said, and then come up with some kind of criteria for what we will or won't do.
Because then it would be very easy, once we know what the conditions are, to be able to say to the HOAs, this is worth your money, this is not worth your money.
Sure.
And if you like it from an aesthetic standpoint, then fine, go ahead and spend your money. But from an actual road drivability condition standpoint, I feel like, we very clearly have that accountability.
Coming from northern Wisconsin, these roads are wonderful.
Yes, they are. I agree.
Even the ones that you say are in bad shape, they're
Yes.
wonderful compared to where I come from.
I completely agree.
I might point out also that we will have an issue in that we made the decision, and we're about to approve the contract today. We made the decision to go ahead and do the Avila roads.
True.
We are doing them. So that's gonna come up as an issue.
I'm not sure Avila ever did any maintenance or did any seal coat like Portofino or Bellagio or others.
They did not.
They
clearly-
did not,
they
and that's
clearly
their
did not.
option, I guess. We have some comment from the Joe.
Joe Schofield from Carina. Mr. Chairman and Board, about 2 years ago, CDD did extensive studies and brought in several engineers and road firms. And the consensus of the engineers, and you could double check this with Tetra Tech, they were one of them, coating the roads does not extend the life in this part of Florida. And they all agreed with that. They all independently made those statements. They aesthetically make them look good, but it's not like being up north where you're sealing cracks from ice. Therefore, we decided as a board back then, when PPAC looked at it, that coating was up to the individual community if they wanted to do it for aesthetic purposes only. It had nothing to do with life. And we also agreed, and I'm sure some of you there were there when we decided we would take care of repaving the roads. And we were going to get an engineer to come in and do a study on a routine basis to evaluate each road. When they got to a certain point of deterioration, PPAC would then what I think they call it, grind up and repave those roads. Mill and grind, okay. So that was discussed several years ago, but double check with Tetra Tech. They were one of the engineering firms that said coating does not do anything other than make it look good. I'm sure, Laura, you may have been involved with those. So I think all this has been previously done, discussed, and really, I thought was finished.
The question is, though, I think is, are there roads that need to be mill and ground? And in the case of Avila, I think we decided that the engineers decided that needed to be done.
Absolutely correct, Phil.
Yeah.
We had them look at it. They determined that, and we proceeded to fund that. And now I understand it's going to be done shortly. And we also agreed at that time we should hire an engineering firm, PPAC should, to evaluate the other roads in our communities and do that on a routine basis. But unless there was really serious damage, if a community wanted to fix a hole or patch a little spot, and it was more for aesthetics than it was for the maintenance or perpetuity of that road, that was up to them to do. We would not do that from PPAC, but a major grind and pave was
I think that's
done.
what the question that we now have before us is, do we want to do that evaluation?
Well, I would recommend, it's not my decision for sure, but I thought that decision was already cast in concrete and we were going to go ahead and do it. But I would recommend you do it.
Sure, it was my understanding that the other evaluation that resulted in the Avila happening was a select evaluation of the roads inside of Pelican Preserve. It was not an extensive evaluation of the roads in Pelican Preserve, where this task authorization that's in front of you now would be to evaluate all of the roads inside of Pelican, not just selected roads. And we do have some requirements too, like if one of the HOAs wanted to do work on a road, they do have to have approval of the district. We have to agree, we have to approve, they have to have right-of-way permits, all that stuff. So it's not like they can just go and fill potholes and seal coat and stuff like that. They still need approval from the district to be able to do it.
I have a question. Number 2, condition evaluation. Is that core samples?
Stephen, Agapi?
Hey, good afternoon, Stephen Agapi, Tetra Tech. For the purpose of this scope, we did not include core samples. This is just going to be from visual inspections based
That's a
on the
field,
FAT.
that's item number one, 13,285. Item number two, condition evaluation. If you're doing a condition evaluation, you need a core sample. What do you define as condition evaluation?
So we would be using the field manual from FDOT for flexible pavement condition assessment, and that's just based on the actual visual condition of the pavement. I agree. In some instances, core samples may be required, but that can be fleshed out during the design phase of the project. If you have a road that looks like it's deteriorating poorly, and it needs to be replaced based on your field observations, and it's number one priority, you can, during the design phase, have a core sample done. They're fairly inexpensive, and at that time, you can make a consideration for the design. So it's not necessary at this point, in our opinion.
So what is then the difference between 1 and 2?
Yeah, what are you spending $14,000 additional on for conditional evaluation?
So task one is for 2 field guys to physically inspect all of the roadways. And then task 2 is to bring all that data back and score the roads and rank them and provide a report for your review and to come up with a recommendation for scheduling and for a cost as well.
What kind of duration are you expecting for the field evaluation? That
It's done
seems excessive.
here, 60 days. The
Yeah,
Brad's
so
paying.
we have 60 days of calendar of time, but we only have I think like 32 hours of field time. So, we anticipate all the field work to be done within 1 week. We put in some flexibility on our calendar just to avoid any change order request, based on the calendar. But we expect as soon as we get approval, to have the work done in February, and the field work will take less than 1 week.
So, it seems to me that we need to decide, this committee needs to decide whether it recommends this work. By the way, does this I assume, Laura, has to be approved by the CDD?
Nope, it's within my spending threshold.
It's within your spending threshold, okay. So,
I have one other question. After you do task 1 and 2, will they come back and say, okay, now we need core samples?
yes,
Potentially.
that's what he's saying.
Why not include that in task 2?
Well, I mean, you could include you could guess how many core samples we'll need, but once you go out in the field and say, hey, you've got 4 roads that need to be replaced within the next 5 years. Let's focus on those. Let's grab a couple core samples here. We saw a really bad spot there. Let's definitely get one there. I think that's a better approach than just guessing how many we'll need or coring roads that don't need to be cored at this time.
All right.
Yeah, I think the truth of the matter is, John, that once we have the evaluation done, there may be more costs that.
Chelsea, can you mute yourself? Thanks.
So,
Any other comments or questions?
I move that
We have another comment, Phil, in the audience.
Kathleen Anderson, president of Avila. Just to talk about Avila, it's the talk here some as a template. In the past, 2 board members have told me, one is Paul Runyak, who was there at the start of Avila Community, that they have come. He said he met with engineers out to look at the road, and at one point it was going to be done. I'm just relaying history. 2 years ago, Jan Leeson on the board contacted PPAC about the roads because we had potholes. And whoever she spoke to at the time, she was told the roads weren't bad enough. And fine, because I'm not the expert on it. We came now because I first asked for assistance. Where do I go to see about the road? Because rumor had it that Avila owned the street. Through research then and from Phil instructing me that it is brought to P-PAC. That's how this all started. So just to clear it, Avila took no responsibility, in assuring that the road was proper because people just didn't know. And that's how that all came about, just to clarify the history some. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, to get this on the table, I will move that we schedule an evaluation of of all the roads in Pelican Preserve by Tetra Tech.
Do we have a
At a
second?
cost not to exceed $28,000.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Take a vote.
Well, you
Any
want
other
to see
discussion?
Where's the money gonna come from? You have a very small, there's not enough money in your engineering budget for this, so where would you like it to come from?
Again, repairing the roads.
This is not a repair, this is an engineering task.
Well, yeah, but the
That's
fact
not
that
capital?
it's capital. The
That's a
fact that it
stretch.
relates to a capital expenditure. Can we not
So it
use?
relates to a potential capital expenditure, I would argue with you there, but where would you like me to take the money from for this?
Capital expenditure.
Yeah, this is not a construction project, this is an engineering task.
If somebody hurries up and puts that 500 and some $1,000 back in the
You're
unassigned
ready,
reserves,
you have 1.4
then that's
million, you have 1.4 million in your unassigned reserves right
then
now.
that's where it should come from, in my opinion.
Well, and we already have enough in there, right? We got $31,000 in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
No, there's 1.4.
They're gonna take all your money, Alan.
And I would like to correct the motion to, that the not to exceed is what the number on the task authorization, which is $27,320.
So just to clarify that, the field inspection is to be 32 hours of work for $13,000. I want what they get paid.
That's a Stephen Agape question, so I am the messenger here.
I know you are. So Stephen, can you speak to that? That just to me seems excessive.
Well, I mean, it's 2 staff employees so in total it's 64 hours. I don't know what else to say. I mean, they're employees of Tetra Tech, and that's their rate. We pay competitively.
So it's 64 hours at $200 an hour. 207.58. I've been corrected. Thank you, Bill. So just
Yes.
I just want to go on record as saying that.
And I will note that their rates are we have an agreement with them where their rates are set. So they can't change the rates based on projects. The rates are based on the employee that's doing the work, the level of the employee that does the work, and type of employee. So the rates are fixed.
Okay.
And rates in these particular kind of cases, as with our law firm and others, include overhead. They're more than just the pure pay of the employee.
And I just want to be clear that it bore more discussion.
Yes.
Any other comments? There's a motion on the board and there's a second. Do we have a vote? Do you want to take a roll call vote or just?
Aye.
You can do
All
all in
approved?
favor. Yep.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay?
Okay, so
Nays.
just to clarify, I'm gonna move 28,000 just for round number purposes from the unassigned for this TA with a not to exceed cost of $27,320.
Okay, we come back with a minus figure next month. Don't blame me.
Can you see me?
Just a question, isn't that subject to the
It's within my spending threshold. Yep.
Thank you.
I have the authority to approve this.
Mr. Chair, can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
Is there we've got a full agenda.
I know.
And
I
we
need
have
to
a
leave
hard,
by 4:30.
we had a hard stop at 4:30 all the time. Is there anything on the current agenda that we can maybe move to next month versus now? Or is it everything that has to be done now?
I think there are I think there are items here that can be moved to next month unless there are some objections.
I would suggest that, and it was already stated in one of the items, that the traffic cloud subscription could possibly be done, decided upon and done by uh, the staff.
Item L is critical. We have to discuss that.
Yes.
And G,
All right, what items have to be discussed today?
L,
L and G.
they should be fairly simple. I think we should go ahead
Yeah,
and
we
do
got
those and then see where we
The rest
stand.
if we have time. So.
All right, let's move to the item G, landscaping subcommittee appointments.
Okay, can I go ahead?
Yes.
I had a meeting, another one on Tuesday, got some more volunteers, about 25 people
Oh,
attended,
here.
got a lot of good questions. Yeah. And we got approximately a dozen applicants of people to be on the board. And I was told I could recommend 6. If the board wants others, then that's fine. I based my recommendation, I mean, all the candidates were good. There was nobody that was bad. I appreciate everybody that volunteered for this, and I know any of them would probably do a very good job. But the ones that I would kind of like to see brought forward, my opinion.
If I could interrupt just for a
Sure.
second. I did just hand out, there was a late submittal of Cindy Watterson, also applied to be on this subcommittee. I just handed that out to you here at the table.
Okay.
Because her name's not on the list.
Right. So of the 6 that I would, if I had my choice, I would pick myself
Good
as a
choice.
member of the subcommittee. What's that?
No,
Sure.
he's going to be a member.
Of the subcommittee.
He can. It just,
Yes,
it
that
gets
was discussed
complicated, but he
before.
can.
We'll get to that part later, I think, is what you're getting to. The next person I would like to see on it is Bruce Platt. Bruce is here. The reason I chose Bruce, there's 2 criteria. One, where they reside. Bruce is in Matarita too, because I'm trying to hit different areas for different representatives instead of everybody in one area. And Bruce has already started. One of the main focuses of the subcommittee is to monitor Marescape to see how they're doing, if they're fulfilling their contract. We want to use the ticket system. Bruce has already started doing this, has demonstrated the ticket system will work for us. And this is exactly what we're wanting a lot of the people on the subcommittee to do, as well as just volunteers. The next person I would like to see is Vince Pagetto. Vince lives in Solero, different community. Vince used to own a commercial landscape business. So I think he would be a very good fit. Steve Keller lives in Carina area. Steve used to work in an arboretum. Obviously, what I would consider a pretty good landscape fit. Another person is Nancy Smith, who's in Prado. Nancy's already on 2 landscape subcommittees in the Prado area, is moving some projects forward, has proven herself to be more than a great person to deal with. So I would move Nancy Smith forward. And the last one is the candidate we just got, which is Cindy Watterson. Cindy has put a lot of time and effort since moving to Florida into the landscaping, trying to learn plants and things like that. I happen to know her personally. So again, there weren't any bad candidates, but if I were given my choice, those are the people I would choose and why.
Could I recap? I'm going to miss one because I was multitasking.
Okay.
I have you,
Yep.
Bruce, Steve, Vince, Nancy, Cindy, that's 6.
Correct. And that's all I'm proposing at this time. Pardon? No.
Oh, you didn't, okay, sorry.
Okay.
And
I just
that-
want to make sure I didn't miss anyone.
No,
Okay.
that's all I was proposing is a subcommittee of 6. Again, it's not meant to be a slight to anybody that applied. There were no bad candidates, but if I had to pick my group to start off with, that's who I'd start.
I move that we accept Mark's recommendations for the people to be selected for the landscape committee.
I'll
And
second that motion.
And that we pass those recommendations on to they have to go to the board. Is that right, Laura?
No, PPAC recommendations need to go to the board. this is a subcommittee of
This is
PPAC,
okay.
so
We can
you
do it-
approve them.
We can do it ourselves?
Mhm.
Okay. I have a curiosity question. The question is to why we have that thing that says, are you registered to vote in this area?
I didn't do the application. I don't know. I guess it's to see if they're Florida residents, maybe. I'm not sure.
I have no idea.
I honestly haven't looked at the application, so I don't know.
Any other comments from the board, from the audience?
Can Mark just explain how his membership on the committee is going to work with the Sunshine Law variations?
What I was going to get
I
to,
heard that, thank you.
well, at the end of the meeting, is it was explained to me, if I'm on the subcommittee and also on the board, I can't talk to other members of the subcommittee.
Other than in the meeting.
Correct, other than in a publicized meeting. For that reason, it would be my intent at the end of this meeting to submit my resignation, because it'd be ridiculous to be on the subcommittee and at this point leading it and not being able to talk to any of the other subcommittee members. So I would do basically what Doug Zanter did with the ponds. He left this committee so he could assume the head of that committee. Not that I should assume I will be the head of the landscaping committee, because we have to hold a meeting which will be publicized and the public is invited to attend, and then have a vote on who is chairman and vice chairman and what our path forward will be.
Thanks for the explanation. Appreciate it.
And that was the latest understanding I got today from Laura as to what I needed to do in order to basically function on the subcommittee.
Thanks.
Is that still accurate, Laura?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, you can't.
Let's just
Yeah,
leave it at that
yes.
for now.
His brain is full, thank you.
A motion on the floor. There's a motion on the floor. Any other comments from the audience? Does this require a motion? I assume it does.
Yes.
Appoint the
Okay.
committee.
Because you're
Oh, yeah.
appointing a subcommittee,
Oh,
so
yeah.
yes.
Okay. Take a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Is unanimous.
All right, let me get Keith.
The other one is.
All right, next item on the agenda, can we go to item L?
Mhm.
The Vila Road milling, resurfacing. Any comments?
I think we-
Again, Kathleen Anderson, president of VILA. So going back this past year, I come to the meetings. I didn't make December because there was COVID at my house. But I was told, and I have the date down, that word will be given to me, property manager or me, when the residents can be informed when to prepare what they need to do for parking and everything, if it ever got to that. And Scott Chart was here. I was told he would be notified and then the word would come out. That's what I was told. I haven't
Let me grab Keith.
heard anything about it. I heard some rumblings, rumors, which I tend to ignore, kind of like the guy living at the town center. And
Sorry.
and Bob informed me, so I don't know what's going on. I heard now they're starting this month. The residents aren't informed, like I was indicated they would be at a meeting here more than once. And, you know, mill grind, I've seen it before. People drive in. We have vehicles, trucks that come in to turn around all the time. You know, how does this work is what I'm asking. Or I stay out of it and have them call one of you, because I'm going to get asked about it. Granted, you guys have done the work, the money for months, you know, and people had to be explained. This isn't just a 1 month task. But at the same time, being president in there, I'm going to be first on the ground. And all of a sudden, the roads are being tore up. And everybody's going to say, where do I park? They're going to drive in the concrete driveways, and the black's going to happen. So I would like to know what's going on, who's the company, that type of thing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Keith Riddle, Public Works Director. I missed the first part of the conversation, but I got the gist of it. So you already have seen the recommended low bidder. Have you voted on that yet?
We have not.
Not yet, okay. So Vanessa Construction is the parent low bidder right now, or is the low bidder. I have a meeting with them on site on the 23rd to go over the scheduling. After I talk to them and we set the scheduling dates, we will be notifying the HOA to distribute notifications to all the land. That would be you, right? So you will be informed on what to
Thank you
do.
very much.
Okay? Anything else about Avila while I'm up here?
I move that we accept the recommendation of the staff to have Bonus Paving and Grading do the work on the Avila Circle milling and resurfacing.
I second.
Any other comments?
Fine here. Kathleen Anderson, one more question. At one of the meetings, the company that was here at the time, I think it was Southern something, they were sent back because no one knew if the curb and gutter was included in that. It's not all the guttering in Avila, but we have jagged edges, we have some completely tore up, and that's the last I ever heard of it. And they were told they asked if it was included in their bid at the time, and they didn't know, so they were told to go back and include it in their bid. So I don't know if gutters are included or what.
Curb and gutter work is not included in this contract.
Can I ask why?
It wasn't designed that way initially.
It was told at a meeting here to do it. That's why I'm asking.
I wasn't here at the time, and Tetra Tech did the design on it, so I can't speak to why it didn't get in the plans. I can have Tetra Tech look back into the notes and see what the reason was for it. It really should happen if it needs to happen before the paving takes place.
Not all of it, but there's parts, if somebody caught their leg.
When you referenced another company, was there another bid out at one point for this work?
Yes, or they were here.
We had them they did some of the partial evaluation, I believe. Keith, yeah.
I'll check with Tetra Tech and see if something
It was
fell through the crack.
Atlantic Southern, they were here, the gentleman gave me his card.
I just want to remind everybody, if you're in the audience, please come up to the podium so we don't have the back and forth for the benefit of those who are online.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the bid, there was a bid because an amount was said, it was 130 or 26,000 at the time. It was asked by Phil if that included the guttering. And because I asked the question, Phil asked the gentleman with Atlantic Southern, and he said no. Phil said, go back, bid, and bring it to us. I didn't bring my notes with me, but I have it all dated and noted.
Keith, ballpark, do we have any idea what putting that extra work in would be?
This is the first I've heard of damaged gutters, so I can't answer that. But I will look into it for sure and see. The other contract that was referenced.
Make sure you're so quiet anyway.
The other company that was referenced, do you guys recall a bid proposal coming to you for approval? No.
I don't think you got that far.
No, we never did.
We never got that far.
Okay. I'll get
Let
into
me
it.
ask you this, how long is that bid good for Bonus?
It's going to be noted on their bid, but it's typically 30 or 60 days. But we are under contract. We're just waiting on a signature back from them. So it's nothing that can't be, removed too and deleted if we had to, but I can amend it. We can do a change order to add curb and gutter if need be. So it's not like we're stuck with this and we can't do anything else.
I assume you went out and saw the road, correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right. In just your walkthrough, did you find that the gutters were in bad shape at all?
Overall, not too bad, no. But there
No
are
more than most.
Typical for a community that age, yes. Mm-hmm.
So typically when you go out for repaving like this, you do not do the gutters, or you do?
It depends on the severity of the gutters, yeah.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
During your walkthrough, you did not feel it was absolutely necessary.
No, and I just want to let you know, by the point I came on here, these plans were done. I mean, 90% complete. So that evaluation would have taken place by Tetra Tech, whether the gutters needed to be rehabbed or not.
Does it make sense that maybe you would meet with this lady here and go out and take a look at those?
Sure, absolutely.
And then see whether or not another bid is necessary?
Absolutely.
I think maybe I ought to amend my motion to say that we accept the contract as is, with the potential of additional expense for the paver work at a future date.
like I said, we can do a change order to this contract if need be to add curb and gutter.
Okay.
Mhm. But we want to do the curb and gutter work before the paving, milling and paving for
Well,
sure.
would curb and gutter work be done by the exact same contractor, or would they sub it out?
They would do their work, I'm pretty sure. I can't say for sure they do.
Because some
pretty
of them
much-
would sub
yeah,
it out.
Some of them would sub it out, but that's not uncommon at all. Well, but Vanessa does everything, so they would probably do it themselves.
They've done quite a bit of curb and gutter, valley gutter work for us.
Mhm.
If you had to get it done before time, would it be better off to just put a contract out to do the gutters? I mean, or put it out as one contract? You prefer to do
I would
that?
do one contract
Okay.
because once we go through, we'd have to go through a whole,
All right.
bidding proposal process and all
Bidding
that.
process.
When we already have Vanessa on board, it's a lot easier. Yeah.
So at this point, we're just looking for your approval for the milling and resurfacing portion of the contract.
Yeah. Approval for the milling and resurfacing part of the contract with the knowledge that,
Not a caveat, that we're looking for
Uh-huh.
approval for the milling and resurfacing contract.
okay.
And I second it.
Any other discussion from the board here? Any other discussion from the audience? Let's take a vote.
I have a question. Oh, I love it when you hang your head, John. How I feel today. Kathleen Anderson, president of VILA. So to clarify, not all the curbing's bad, but that's just my layperson opinion. And I'm not on the board, but can you get a better price if you negotiate it all at once? Just a question.
So vote.
Yeah, let's vote.
John?
All right. Take a vote.
Aye.
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 Okay.
We
Now, I
will,
suggest that.
we will be taking that item to the board for their approval on the 19th, and this is way outside of my approval threshold. So this will be going in front of the board on the 19th. We're actually holding the agenda item, waiting for you guys to vote on it. So
I think it's the consensus of the board that we would like to have the staff go to Bonus and find out how much it would cost to do the paving work.
The curb and gutter
Curb
work?
and gutter.
Yes,
I mean-
I'll meet up next week. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a request, sorry, for an agenda item. Poor Stephen Bloom has been hanging out
Yeah.
on the line since 2:00. Could you please address item 7H next, please?
Item 7H is money market account investment alternatives. Stephen?
Okay, so
Thank you,
for those, not a problem. I've been keeping myself busy. For those of you who know, kind of pre-COVID, there was a point in time when we were regularly investing excess cash in other options other than checking account and money market account and your sweep account. At one point in time, we had between 15, maybe even more, to 20 different CDs of varying length and amounts, for probably well over maybe $2.5 million in total. At the time, our strategy, which was a strategy we would use again, was to ladder the CDs so that every month a portion of that total amount would come due. Whether it was 2 CDs or 3 CDs, totaling, maybe 250,000 or 300,000, they would come due. And then at that time, we would do an evaluation and determine, did Pelican Preserve need that cash, or could we reinvest it and kind of move the ladder down, in terms of keep ladder in the CD. And it worked very well, and it allowed quite a bit of flexibility once the full spectrum was set up. It was good to have, more flexibility each month, additional cash. It also, obviously, as those CDs were maturing at the time, interest rates were continuing to climb. So the CD would mature, and then it would get reinvested even at a better rate, than some of its prior CDs. Obviously, with COVID, basically the CDs, dried up. The rates were it just wasn't even worth it. So everything was moved back into, the sweep accounts, money market accounts, checking accounts, wherever needed, really basically to fund spending, that's really was the sole purpose because there just wasn't anything available for investing. Now that has all changed. Happily that's changed, and what you're seeing in front of you is a rate sheet from several different banks. We usually will go out and look at between 10 to 15 banks, and then we'll kind of put a chart together in the top 4 or 5 that are actually worth looking at just to give us a good comparison. We also take a look at some of the other types of investments. Some of you might be familiar with the state SBA, the Florida Prime. We try and get a broad look at everything. But at the end of the day, we're really looking more at the Treasury bills, CDs, things that are just super safe, and will actually still have some sort of a flexibility when you ladder them, and we're not doing anything really long term. So with all that in mind, now we're bringing this back in front of the committee. We want to, start this back up, and obviously we want your, both your recommendations, your thoughts, comments, and ultimately approval to get going with this. And again, we would look at, basically the 3 months, 6 months, nothing really. It's just not even worth it right now at the 12 months, as people are not sure what's going to happen. So that's kind of what we did. We have your rate sheet here. And then we also have kind of a very conservative look at how much we could start with, just to kind of start this process out. And really, again, the goal is going to be to ladder this out to basically provide as much interest, safe, keeping the safety of the principal of the top priority, earn some interest, and maintain your liquidity so that you don't have a project and you're wondering where the cash is going to come from.
My opinion, this is a no-brainer. We ought to do it.
I agree.
Question, just a minor question, Stephen, in the investment worksheet for Pelican Preserve, the net amount available came to $1.6 million, but the investment plan only called for $1.5 million. Was there a reason for that?
No, just being conservative to kick this off. Keep in mind, when I was doing that, not all of your assessment money comes in. So that worksheet is going to be very dynamic, meaning, it keeps getting updated, looking at the cash, trying to figure out projects and stuff. It's a first time snapshot to give everybody kind of a basic idea on how this would work. But it's going to have to continually be updated to kind of make sure, that again, we want to keep liquidity so that you're not, hey, I'm going to put everything in 12-month CDs, and then all of a sudden you need that money and you're starting to have to break CDs. If you ladder this and kind of do it on a very gradual approach, you will not have to worry about that. You'll get really good flexibility. You'll be able to achieve the interest rates you have here and obviously keep everything very safe.
Since you're the financial expert, do you have a recommendation, or is that something you choose not to do?
Well, at this point, just from the looking at the rates, what my recommendation was going to do some 3 months CDs and also some 3-month T-bills, and then just kind of from there look at where the rates are going. Because again, this right now is a snapshot as of the end of December. We'll do another one. We do this monthly, and then see what it looks like. But I will not be doing 12 months at this point. It's just not worth it. And then ultimately, also keep in mind that the board is going to have another look at this as well, and I'll take into account their comments, thoughts, and what they're looking at. But I think between the 3 months is probably certainly the first way to go, and then maybe start looking at some of the 6 months, but probably a smaller amount.
So you're looking at the First Horizon, I assume, because that's the
First
largest.
Horizon, yep, First Horizon for both, only because that's where you're banking right now, and the margins between some of these other banks are just not significant enough to start, wiring money outside of First Horizon. But we do this in case it does change. Let's say, for example, Valley National came back and said, you know what, we've got, a 3-month CD or a 6-month CD or a 3-month T-bill, and we're doing, 5.5%. Well, that's certainly something to take a look at. But it's always kind of, keeps it a little bit cleaner when you can stay within the same bank that you're actually using for your
I'm not
accounts.
sure why we would do anything other than what he's recommending.
Yeah, and I would say just 2 years ago, I guess, Stephen, we did this, or 3 years ago,
Pre-COVID.
pre-COVID. And John and I guess, were the only ones who were on this committee at that time. It worked out very successfully, so. And Stephen is very careful, so do we need a motion to do this one, Laura?
It's your money, so yeah, I would be more comfortable if you just make a formal motion and as a group agree to go ahead and pursue this.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Motion has been seconded. Any other discussion? Take a vote.
Aye.
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 All right, Stephen, you got your
Any
marching
nays?
orders.
No, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. I think you can drop off now.
Will do. Everyone have a great night.
I have a flight that takes off in an hour and a half.
Oh, yeah.
Good luck too.
Oh, yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, and I know we still have some items left here, but I'd like to have a little bit of time before the meeting ends about some security issues.
Okay.
Might I suggest that item I could be done by the staff?
I'm not sure what you mean by be done by staff.
Well, the
Approve the renewal.
approved and,
Well, that's not staff's decision there. It's your budget.
okay.
Well, I'm kind of familiar with this as I sat in on the meeting. And so I'd like to move that we authorize staff to move forward with renewing this contract.
Okay, you don't have it in your budget for this year, so where would you like the money to come from?
Well, I would say the unassigned reserves, but,
We've got $1,000 left.
well, we technically have more than that, correct?
Yeah, in
No,
the unassigned,
3,000.
yes, there's plenty.
Yeah.
There's plenty there, but
There's
there is no line item for this because previously, doing some research, this was something that was passed through from Castle and paid as a reimbursement through your O&M.
Okay.
So I am totally fine having the district pay the bill for you, but I just need to know where to take the money from because it's not something that was budgeted for.
I suggest we take it from
I think it's like
unassigned.
2,000.
Could we,
Let me pull it.
all right,
Just a
suggested
minute.
may we take it from unassigned.
Is this something that has to be done this particular month? This
If we
meeting.
don't get it renewed, what I understood is that they would have a lapse in their service and they use it,
Okay.
they're using it continually.
Yeah, because it looks like it expires on the 27th, so it
Correct.
would expire before the next time you meet.
Okay.
It's
it's-
$2,000. I have it up on the screen.
Yeah, thank you.
How much?
2,000. I have it on the screen.
Oh, so we do have 1,000 left. We had 3,000. So
We don't want to overspend.
Okay.
I'll second it. But does anybody have a proposal?
Any other discussion?
Jennifer Lewis with KW Property Management. 5 minutes before I came to this meeting, I got an email with an adjustment for the invoice for Traffic Suite. That the invoice date was 7/29/2022, due on 8/28. And I think that's already been processed. So is there an invoice that happens twice a year?
Who's that one from?
Is this from Traffic Suite? Is this the same software we're talking about?
All Traffic Solutions. It's up on the board.
All Traffic Solutions. I just have an adjustment. I don't have the actual
This
invoice.
was probably done
Castle.
Hmm?
Mm-hmm.
By Castle, maybe?
by Castle. Yeah, this would have been done by Castle because this has been a continuing program. We
Right.
need this software in order to run the studies that the Safety and Security Work Group.
Right. I don't have
does.
the invoice with me. I just have what KW sent me, the adjustment line item on it.
So could I make a recommendation? Since you discussed already covering the cost, assuming that it has not been paid,
Yeah.
I would need to know where you'd like to cover it from, and then I will work with you to research, to
Perfect.
see, because I should be able to go back through our reimbursement requests
Okay.
to see if it's already been paid. So if it has not already been paid,
Paid.
I need approval to pay it, and I need to know where to pay it from, and we'll take care of it.
Okay.
And do you need a motion for that? Probably don't.
It's 2,000, it's up to you. I mean, I just need to know where you want me to take the money from. That was my recommendation, is that we, I will work with Jennifer to research it. If it's not been paid, we will pay it and take the money from your unassigned reserves.
Correct.
Okay.
Bill Sarica from the PPCA. Laura, why aren't we just taking this out of the O&M agreement funds?
Because
Yeah, I mean, that's where, yeah, we're prepared. We were paying for it through
I can
KW.
use that line if you'd like.
Yeah, we'll just,
Yeah, that would
yeah,
make more sense.
that's where,
actually.
that's where it should come from.
Okay.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Any other comments? All right, so you're going to take it from the O&M?
If it's not already been paid, yes, because that's where it
Okay.
would have been paid from originally.
All right. We have
Alan,
10 minutes?
Alan said
So we have items, according to my records, everything I scratched off here, we have not discussed B, D, E, or J.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay. So
I can skip most of B, but I need approval on two easy things. Basically, monuments and cul-de-sacs, I'm not going to go into the whole discussion on it, but we pay HOAs up to $2,500 at this point. That's been past practice. It's what we've done. We asked them to make an official request from us, and I've gotten two that would like to get going on this. So I hate to stretch it out another week just because we ran out of time. Viadana and Matarita too would each like to be allocated up to $2,500 to redo monuments and cul-de-sacs. And that's within the landscape budget. So,
Oh, it is within the budget?
correct. There is a budget item for monuments and cul-de-sacs.
May I ask which ones? Because I have a request from anyone that fill in my.
Matarita too and Viadana have just said.
And Mark, just to clarify, there was some confusion on whether or not the allocation of funds was going to change the ongoing maintenance ownership for monuments and.
They're ours.
Right, that doesn't move them into the communities, correct?
Correct,
Yeah, okay, I just
No,
wanted that on record,
This
because
is,
that was a
this
question.
is for capital, basically replacement, but not for ongoing maintenance.
Correct, okay.
Anyway, I would like approval. I would make a
I have one
motion.
question. Portofino didn't ask for the 2,500?
We, from my understanding, I don't know, did they send in the request for it? I thought they did.
I thought they did also.
I don't have it.
I was left out of the middle of that. So basically,
I don't even
like
have the ones
Pepper-
that you're asking for, so I.
well, no,
those-
they just came in.
Okay. Yeah, you have a total of, I just lost my.
Can I amend that and ask for Portofino to also include that?
Portofino was already approved as to whether or not they send in an invoice to Laura to be paid.
No,
Yeah, I don't
okay,
recall
no,
seeing
they did
it.
not. All right.
There's
They did not.
$15,000 on that line item for the year. So.
Right. So, I
Okay.
mean, there's money budgeted for this.
Mhm.
Well, I would move that we authorize the payment to those communities.
And-
Well,
and
wait,
again-
we don't pay the HOAs. They have to have whoever's doing the work for them send the bill to the district in the district's name, and we will pay the contractor directly for the amount approved by PPAC.
Up
Right.
to $2,500. Anything over that,
Amend whatever
HOA
I
is
said.
responsible for.
Okay.
I make a motion that we approve for those two HOAs
Second that.
up to
I
$2,500
second that.
each.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Vote from the board?
Aye.
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 Any nays? It is approved. All right, we have 9 minutes left.
Go team.
Alan said he had a important.
Oh, the.
Well, I guess I'd need some clarification maybe from the committee. And I hate to say something without Randy being here, because Randy has security, And I think there's a gentleman here with,
Dean's here, he's the chair.
Dean's the chairman.
yeah, okay. Maybe Dean, maybe you can explain it. What is the security role within Pelican Preserve? We've had a lot of security issues, or several security issues lately. And what does security really do? Are they just gatekeepers, or are they have other responsibilities besides that?
Are you asking the company or the group?
Well, I'm asking, no, he would know what the company, because I think they even talked at the president's meeting today, didn't they?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Dean Groves. I'm chairman of the Safety and Security Subcommittee. The question on security is, it sounds like a simple question, but it's not simple at all. Our committee works with Gateway Services and with the representatives of Wiser to kind of coordinate what's going on in terms of safety and security in particular. The management of the security contractor was with the community association. So there's a kind of an overlap there. But we deal with the representatives. We review post orders. We actually are meeting in a few weeks with Wiser to go over some suggestions for some revisions to those. There'll be suggestions that get brought forward to this committee and to the community association as well. But it's a joint role. It's coordination, and management is by the community association.
By the community association or by PPAC?
Community association. Bill, right?
Because of the ONS.
Right.
Bill Sirico, PPCA. Yeah, the O&M agreement assigns safety to the community association acting as agent for the district, right?
Okay.
So we manage the contract, but obviously you folks have the say in how that contract gets created, formulated. You make your recommendations to the district supervisors, and then they actually let the contract with Wiser.
Okay.
But I gotta say this, we use the term security. We use the term security rather loosely. If you read our covenants, it says we're neither obligated to, nor do we provide security. We may provide for a community patrol, which is what actually happens with Wiser. They have no law enforcement authority. They can't detain or arrest. They can observe and report. So security is a interesting term. So we don't have a security patrol. We have a community patrol.
Yeah. I'm really aware of that, Bill, but we've had a lot of security issues, and so somehow or other there has to be something done, as far as I'm concerned, to try to address those. In one situation, and I think some of the things were brought up at the meeting today there, but in one such situation, even the officer hung up on the resident that was calling for a problem.
Yeah, that was inexcusable. That was a breakdown in our discipline over Wiser, and we together will address that.
Yeah,
with the Wiser management.
And it's the other thing that I heard, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but it was brought out at your meeting this morning that the guy that was living in the fitness center, or
there was no one living in the fitness center.
Yes, there was.
That's a rumor.
That's not true. I checked it out. That's not correct.
Okay, so what we reported to us by the management
I know that's what reported to you. That is not correct. I've talked to the people that was there. I've even seen where the machete and everything else is stored right now.
Well, then
so
you
what we
have
need,
knowledge that we have not.
Yeah, apparently I do, but that shouldn't happen. That should be the management of KW should know all that. And apparently it did not, because there are employees that have that knowledge, and I've talked to them.
I'd like to know who those employees are, and I'd like to talk to them.
And the concern that I have is that unless somebody was really checking on this, We have no security. We have no security.
And that's beyond actually the purview of the advisory committee and the
I
district.
I
We're talking
agree.
about security inside the town center.
Can
And
I
know
just,
that our management company
the
is taking
security
that up.
inside the town center is not covered by the Wiser contract because that is not a district asset.
Well, but that's beyond, as far as I'm concerned, okay.
Then
You got
that's
a,
an
you
issue
got
with
a
you
contract
and
for, you got a
PPCA.
contract for gatekeepers is
We
what
do.
you have. That's it. And so somehow or other, we got to figure something out so we can have better security within Pelican Preserve. That's my point.
And aside from what happens with the advisory committee, I know I spoke with Adam today, spoke with Jennifer today, especially after the meeting this morning. Adam is bringing in an outside consultant to do a security review of our assets, town center, Rocky Center. Do we need cameras? Do we need guards? Whatever. Do we need to change the locks? What's the deal with, keeping intruders out? We'll get all that done, but that's really a community association issue, right? I think.
Yes.
All right. Well, then I guess we put you on the hot seat.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's what I get
Yeah.
big bucks for.
You get an extra zero.
All right, we have a hard break at 4:30, is that correct?
It gets close to that as possible, please. Yes.
All right. Bill, do you have any comments regarding the fence perimeter? You want to just give an update?
Okay, that's again, that's not, that's a community association asset. It's not a.
I know, I think it'd be good to just give an update of that.
Well, we have we had extensive hurricane damage. About 85 panels were destroyed, and we have a contract to repair it. As with a lot of things now, supply chain is, well, we don't really know when we're going to have the material to do it. But this morning at the President's Council meeting, we ended up talking about trying to find some temporary repairs, and our management company is working on that.
All right. One of the questions I had was, there's a lot of rusty rebar and everything on the existing, and if we keep repairing it,
We have
a small wind is going to knock a lot of these down.
We've added items both to our expense budget and to our capital budget to do both replacement and preservation work to try to prevent that term.
And I think you had a number of how many you can replace.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's within the purview of the advisory committee, but we're looking to replace
for information,
40 or 50 panels a year. But it's not going to be until, I think the first replacement starts in our capital budget in 2 or 3 years.
2 to 3 years? I don't, some of that fence.
I think this is a discussion better to have at the PPCA
Okay.
meetings, please. Thank you.
So we ended up with what, 3 items that we need to continue on?
D, E, and J, I see.
I didn't really do B.
So do we need
Well,
to
you
have
kind of did B.
anything official to
Kind
you
of.
to just
We need to
roll it?
revisit B. So we'll put B, D, E, and J on for next time.
Okay.
And then if you could just summarize what was approved and get me whatever information I'm going to need for those, so I know what to expect for the communities for the monuments, please. Proposal, or if you could forward me the request, that would be good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I move the meeting be adjourned.
Did we set agenda for next time, or that's where we're going to start with B, D, E, and J, and then you'll let us know about the rest?
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure.
What date's that week?
It's the second the Thursday, it looks like it's the 9th of February. Their meetings are always the second Thursday of the month.
February 9th.
Yes.
February 9th is right.
All right. We're good? All right.
Who would I send my resignation to?
You can send it to me.
Thank you, everybody, for putting.
I mean, I get everybody moving by 4:30.
We all contribute.
I didn't bring up Randy's stuff. He's going to be upset.
We don't, what was Randy's directly, yeah, they always try to. I haven't seen, they haven't submitted to reimbursements. They haven't submitted anything. So, yeah, I don't have anything to challenge at this point. So. Yeah, yeah.
And I'll send you my resignation. And then I'll come there to the next meeting to talk about what I was really supposed to talk about.
Yeah.
With just yeah. And that's the important thing. We really need to tell people, we codify what's going on.
Mr. Gephardt, you're not on leave. I know you graded me this morning. You graded me again?
So then officially, you're not.
I'm sending her my resignation.
And then I will pass that on to the board, to,
So then they will solicit somebody else to replace me.
That's right.
And it will have to be presented to the board.
Laryngitis.
Where do we stand with this right now?